Let's talk some chess. This game was played in 1913 in the Netherlands. The player with the white pieces is Edward Lasker, not Emmanuel Lasker, the 27-year world champion. They're often mixed up. They are distant relatives, but we're talking about Edward Lasker, not Emmanuel Lasker. His opponent is Fritz, Englund, who actually has a counter gambit or gambit trap named after him. But in any case, this is a really fun game to talk about. We'll kick it off with e4 from Lasker. We have e5 from Englund, knight to f3. Very standard, attacking this pawn on e5, and Englund defends it with knight to c6. So all is right. All is well in the world. Knight to c3 and knight to f6, the four knights game, very standard stuff. You've probably seen it many times in your games. I like to play, when I have the white pieces in this position, I like to play knight takes on e5, which goes into the Halloween gambit. After knight takes, then you push the pawn on d4, forcing this knight back, and you're going to get a lot of pawn pushes and exciting development. It's just a fun game that I like to play. Don't ask me about my stats when I do play this opening. But here we have a much more normal move, bishop to b5, attacking the knight here on c6, and threatening to remove this knight and the defender of the e5 pawn along with it. So here we have kind of the first sort of interesting aggressive move in the game, knight to d4, forking the bishop, forking the knight on f3, sorry, the knight on f3. Both are defended, so no problems just yet, but an interesting aggressive attacking move. We have knight takes on e5 by Lasker, so not taking the knight back, but taking the pawn, which is now undefended because the knight moved away from the c6 square, which was defending the square, and now queen to e7 by Englund. This forces knight back to f3 by Lasker, so you won a pawn, but now you've sort of opened up this e4 pawn to a double attack from the knight and the queen, and it's only protected by the knight on c3. So here we have knight takes on e4 by Englund, and again, it looks like white won a pawn, but black is able to capture the pawn back with just a couple of moves. And this is a super threatening position. I mean, these two knights are very scary on d4 and e4. This king is very, it's stuck on e1. It can castle, but for now, it's, there's a discovered attack coming from a discovered check coming from the queen. Don't forget about this bishop, which is attacked by the knight, although it is defended, but scary position to deal with. Here, Lasker just says, I'm going to castle. I'm going to leave these really powerful pieces in the center of the board and get the king to safety. So there's another line here that is interesting to show. Instead of taking the pawn on e4, Englund can take the bishop on b4, and then after knight takes, you get queen takes on e4 because there's no more knight on c3 defending the pawn. So then king to f1, but then queen to c4, forking the king and the knight. So here, after you block with the queen, giving a check of your own on e8, queen takes queen, king takes queen, and now this is a fine position. I think I'd rather play with the black pieces here. The black king still has castling privileges, but this is okay for both sides. So this was another kind of, I think this is okay for both sides. Yes, this is okay for both sides. That's another line that could have happened that I wanted to show, but instead Englund just went into capturing the pawn right away. So we have castles kingside, and now Englund goes into it. This was kind of the issue. Well, not the issue, but castling is by far your best move here, but it leaves these knights and this queen very threatening in the center of the board. And now you get knight takes on c3. And now you've got to be careful because these both knights are attacking this bishop, which is undefended on b5. So here d takes on c3, and here not knight takes on not knight takes bishop on b5, but knight takes on f3 with check. And you might be wondering why not take the bishop on b5. That's because then you would get rook to e1, which pins the queen to the king and loses the queen. So here you'd probably have to just capture the queen with check, queen takes, and then block with the bishop or something like that. So even though you have these two knights attacking this bishop, there's a threat in this position of rook to e1, winning black's queen. And so the next couple of moves we'll see sort of Englund dealing with those issues, not giving Lasker a second to play rook to e1 and win his queen. So we get knight to in this position it wouldn't work to play rook to e1, which you might be wondering, because then you can just block with this. You can block with either knight. Even now you don't want to block there. Yeah, first get rid of the knight, and then after the knight takes on f3 with check, then you play queen to f3, and again this rook to e1 move is being threatened, so now just queen to c5, getting rid of the threat of rook to e1, pinning the queen, and also attacking the bishop on b5. We have rook to e1 anyways with check, no longer winning a queen, so now you just block with the bishop on e7, and now bishop to d3, getting out of harm's way from the queen on c5. We have d5 here by Englund, which is an interesting move, maybe blocking the queen's path on this diagonal, preventing the bishop maybe from coming to e4. The main idea, I'm sure, is opening up some development squares for his light squared bishop, but I probably would have preferred to castle here. Maybe not. But in any case, we get bishop to e3 by Lasker. This develops with an attack on the queen, so the queen is forced to retreat to d6, and now the bishop just continues to annoy this queen with bishop to f4, and here the queen moves to f6. And it's not pinning the bishop to the queen because the bishop can move. The queen is defended by the pawn on g2. But you don't want, let's say you move the bishop away, you don't really want this because then, your king's pawns are just totally destroyed, and it's much easier for Englund to generate an attack. So the bishop is kind of pinned. Let's say it's kind of pinned to the queen. We have queen captures on d5, unpinning here, and this is a kind of an interesting move because it looks like it sacrifices the bishop on f4, right? The bishop is attacked by the queen on f6, and it was defended by the white queen, but now it looks like the bishop is abandoned and the can be captured. And in this position, Englund didn't capture. He played c6, but let's see what happens if he does go ahead and capture. So queen takes bishop. Then you get the immediate bishop to b5 with check. And this is looking not very good. You have the rook on the e-file, you have the queen also eyeing the king, the bishop delivering check. Here you can block with c6, but then bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and you're checking the king and picking up a rook on a8. So after the king moves, queen picks up rook. And this is better for white, but it's actually not that much better. You have two bishops for a rook. So black is black is down 3 pawns, so technically down material, but two bishops for a rook is often good, but the problem here is that this bishop is pinned, this rook is never getting out, it's trapped by the king, so this is a better position for white. So the long story short, you don't really want to take this bishop, but it actually is better than the line that we're going to see, which is c6. Trying to kick this queen away from the d5 square. So the queen goes back to e4. Now, forget about that line where the queen captures bishop because we have queen defending bishop. We also have queen and rook lining up on the e7 square. So now the black queen cannot move away from the defensive e7 because then you get checkmated 1 with queen takes on e7. So instead, we have bishop to e6 by Englund. So now blocking, a very nice move, developing a piece, blocking the queen from the king with now 2 layers of bishops, which is always nice. But now Lasker has a very nice rook lift, rook to e3, preparing to get the rook into the game. If Englund castles kingside, this rook will be a monster, just getting onto the g file and delivering an attack. So here, for the moment, Englund plays bishop to c5, attacking this rook, forcing it to make a decision. And a nice little intermezzo here. We have bishop to e5 by Lasker. This comes with an attack on the queen, so the queen has to move. We get queen to h6, and only now that the bishop is on a better square on e5, now we get rook to g3. And the whole idea here is that by getting the bishop to e5, you now have 2 pieces lined up on this g7 square, and that's obviously quite a threat. And this is just, let's take a moment to appreciate this position. We have all bishops and all queens and all rooks, and most of the pieces are in a very tight-knit area, so there's a lot of tension in the center of the board, and it's very exciting to see how it plays out. So yeah, the threat here is bishop on g7. If the bishop gets to g7, this obviously forks the queen and the rook, so that's no good. So here we just have a massive retreat, the dark squared bishop going to f8, protecting this g7 square, but that's not, I guess it's not a terrible move, but this bishop is now doing nothing but protecting the g7 pawn, and the king cannot castle kingside, and that's not very fun. So Lasker, kind of sensing that maybe the king is, since it's not castling kingside, will castle queenside, puts the rook on d1, and now if the bishop moves away, the rook will be, lining up on d8 and ready to attack the king. So this is where Englund says, okay, fine, I'm going to castle, I'm going to move my king to safety, and castles kingside. I'm sorry, castles queenside. But now the game is actually completely over. See if you can find the winning move for Lasker while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunity to attack here. For the moment, it looks like the queenside castling has gotten out of the way of this rook on the g file. The bishops don't look like they're doing as much, but they actually are. And the winning move here is to play the amazing queen to c6 check, checking the king, and this is just incredible because the king has nowhere to go. The queen is checking the king, it's taking away d7, the bishop is slicing this way, and the only move you can make is accepting this queen sacrifice by taking with the pawn on c6. But now the move you had to see, if you were to play this queen sacrifice, bishop to a6. Now that this b7 square is vacated, this bishop can nicely deliver check, and in this case we have the two bishops slicing across the front of the king. And what about this d7 square? Well, don't forget about the rook on d1, taking away d7, and that means that this is finally checkmate. So a really fun game, a lot of bishops in action, and certainly a case of trying to castle and get the king to safety. But unfortunately, this is a losing position anyways. Let's not say this is an okay position to play. This is a losing position anyways, but the way to most quickly lose this is castle queenside, and then you sack the queen, and it leads to mate, and it's just another move. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Definitely a fun game from the past. Drop a like, drop subscribe. Let me know of other games you'd like to see me review, and we'll talk to you next time.